Is Trump set to win the 2024 election by a landslide? What did we learn from the Republican debates? Find out that and more today as I'm joined by my special guest, Congressman Bob McEwen. I'm Drenda, and this is Drenda on Guard. Let's get into it. Welcome back, all you guardians of truth. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support helps the channel grow so more people can hear the truth and have their eyes open to the devil's schemes. Today we have a great guest for you. Congressman Bob McEwen was a member of the United States House of Representatives representing Southern Ohio's 6th Congressional District for 12 years. He's always been a man who places great value on marriage, family, America, and the conservative values that have made this country great. Mr. McEwen was elected by his colleagues to the two most coveted positions in the U.S. Congress, the Select Committee on Intelligence, which oversees all of our nation's secrets, and the powerful House Committee on Rules, which has jurisdiction over all legislation in the Congress. With that being said, I'm confident that this is going to be an eye-opening interview. Congressman Bob, it's so great to have you with us. Thank you for being here today.
And Brenda, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be with you.
Wow, you've had such an incredible influence on our nation, and you continue. I listened to your politics.
Easy as pie.
Easy as pie, yes. Politics easy as pie.
Politics equals integrity plus economics. I don't care if you're voting in Boston or Baghdad or Buenos Aires or Belgium. You only vote on two things. You vote on integrity, what's right and wrong, your standard for right or wrong, and you vote on the economy as to how much government takes out of people's pockets. Those are the only two things that you vote on. And of course, one of those is spiritual. So that's why it's important. So thank you. That's right. Politics easy as pie.
Wow, I really enjoyed watching you and the display, what you shared and how you did it was so articulate and really powerful. We're using it in our schools. So I want to encourage people to get involved in politics. For so long, people have been told, oh, Christians shouldn't be talking about politics and Christian nationalism is bad, and we've heard all these things. We're in the fight of our life as a nation for our children's future. The dignity of life, male, female, everything, our government value. I'm preaching to the choir, but I am deeply troubled as I look and see what's being taught to kids in schools. I see what's going on in our hospitals. I see government agendas, and they come from a bigger agenda. I look at World Economic Forum mandates and things that they're trying to push on all the nations and bring us into a great reset, one world order. It's shocking, and yet waking people up to realize we can't just go through the day-to-day, work our job, pay our bills, and just, of course, inflation's keeping everybody's nose to the grindstone while they're trying to steal our nation, steal our kids, and our future. So I thank you for making politics easy as pie, because so many of us think it's so complicated, and anything complicated and intentionally complicated is meant to get us to get out of it, not be involved in it, stay away from it. And it keeps values that we have as Christians out of politics, which is so crucial. So tell us, how is it easy as pie, and what do we need to do to fix this mess our nation's in for our kids' sake?
You've touched on it. There's only two sources of right or wrong, only two. And in Adam and Eve in the garden, and all the way down to today, and that is what I think is right. And I set myself up as God. I should be like God, knowing good and evil, or doing what God says. Those are the only two options, only two options. And when you do it God's way, then there is blessing and prosperity. When you do it man's way, any man that separates himself from God, that's called sin, by the way, anything that separates us from God. So when man does it his way, the wages of that is death. Sin, when it's conceived, bringeth forth death. There's a way that seemeth right unto a man, but then there are the ways of death. And so when you do it man's way, man always ends up killing. And so we see this battle going back and forth in politics between those who want to take innocent life and those. And so America, having watched it for 5,000 years, our founders got together and they looked over everything and they said, I think we should do it God's way. Let's just take what the scripture says. And so where do our right and wrong come from? It comes from either what I say is right or what God says. So we were going to say, we're going to go with him. So we're going to say that we hold these truths. Now remember, it will only be truth is based upon whether or not what God says. And so hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created. Okay, there we have the source of our strength. That is John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. And so who was that? That was Jesus, or God, or the Word, or the Creator. They're all synonyms. And so what they said, that man is endowed by Christ, man is endowed by God, man is endowed by his Creator. Okay, now we've established that, with certain inalienable rights, and among those are life. We start out above everything else, life, then liberty. See, liberty is a precious little value if you're dead. So you need to have life first. And our America was founded upon God is the source of right and wrong, protection of life. Now, from that, it became a magnet for the rest of the world. People crawl over cut glass and barbed wire and float in leaky boats just to get to this place. Jews could be chased from every corner of the planet. They knew that if they could just get under the canopy of protection of the American flag, they would be safe. And so this nation is based upon that principle. So our founder said, we don't want anybody to forget that. So from this day forward, on every official document, I don't care if you're discussing Groundhog Day or whatever it is, every presidential proclamation, every act of Congress, when you're all finished, that's to remind people where it comes from. Done in this, the year of our Lord, the 2023rd, and of the independence of the United States, the two most important dates in all recorded history. The independence of the United States at 246th. So just to have people to remind. So then when they take a position of public trust, then they don't do it what I think is right. And by the way, that's the way you can find out about a politician. You can ask him any question. How do you feel about something? And the question is what I think or what God says. And so they wanted to remind people that you're going to swear allegiance on the Bible, not what you think, but what God says. Whether it be dog catcher or president of the United States, we're going to begin there. And then to begin every session of Congress from that day forward, from that day in the Continental Congress and then in the Constitutional Convention, from that day to this, Congress has never met without first calling upon God in prayer so that people would understand it's not what you think, it's not what I think, it's what he thinks. And from that, this little 4% of the population of the world, and it's not because we're smarter or we work harder or we're just better than it, because we're made up of people from all over the planet. And by the way, Drenda, it's being an American is spiritual, by the way. Yes. So you and I can't become Japanese or Chinese, but anybody can become American if they are endowed with those spiritual values of the biblical values that we're talking about. And from that, this little 4% of the population of the world, like you heard me say in the video, that is that there are skyscrapers all over the world. Why? Because an American named Elisha Otis invented the elevator, a safety elevator. And then they are air conditioned because of American Willis Carrier, airplanes because of the Wright brothers, and light bulb because of Thomas Edison, and the tires that are on every car on the planet and every airplane that lands at this moment all over the globe because of Charles Goodyear from Akron, Ohio. This nation has blessed the world as no nation has ever blessed it. Based upon what? Because they're better than anybody else? Nope. They weren't that powerful when they were in India. They weren't that powerful when they were in Nigeria. They weren't that great when they were in China. No, they're great when they became Americans, because America was founded upon a biblical, godly basis. Now, that gets back to your first statement, that the very last people that should withdraw, if you want to destroy it, there's only one way to destroy it, just to withdraw from God, get godly people to withdraw, leave people wandering around. So when someone comes in and says, I think the boys should go to girls' bathrooms, and everybody on the school board thinks, that just doesn't make any sense. And so where would you go for advice?
God's word.
Would you go to the school, or would you go to the editorial board of the newspaper, or would you go take a vote at the football stadium? No, you would want to go to the Word of God. You would want to go to the pastors. You'd want to go to those in the pulpit. Say, what does God say about this?
Yes.
And for 40 to 50 years, we have had graduates of most of the seminaries to say, no. What you need to do is to slam the door in their face and say, I don't get involved in that. And so this nation, as it began to wander around and people began to look, there are those who boldly and profoundly and abundantly stand there having buried their little talent and just punch, say, I don't get involved in any of those things. And I can tell you example after example of members of Congress and politicians, of people that looked for advice and asked for prayer. And the church recently, just McLean Bible in Washington, D.C., where I was in Europe at the time, and I saw that I had suggested that it was President's Day. They were having a presidential day, and what church should he go to? And so Mike Pence and I suggested that Donald Trump go to McLean Bible, but they'd changed pastors. And the new young pastor there, when the president showed up, could only go to one church out of all these places. And so he prayed, but in the course of it, he made sure that he prayed for the leadership of the Congress and for the Supreme Court and everyone and his brother. And I was watching, I read about it in the newspaper in Europe, and I thought, well, that's great. I'm glad that happened. Picked up the paper the next day and found out that this David Platt, the new pastor at McLean Bible, apologized for praying for the President of the United States. Didn't apologize for praying for Nancy Pelosi. Didn't apologize for praying for the Supreme, but apologized for the audacity of praying for the president. So that's kind of what gets back to, why are we in this ditch? Why are this great lighthouse for the gospel that the entire world looks to for leadership? Whenever anything happens in parliaments all over the world, they say, well, you know, in America, they're doing this. Everyone looks to America as the standard of righteousness in the world. And as it begins to wobble, it's very major part is because of God's people have abandoned the public square. And quite frankly, I'm here to tell you that just in the most recent times, just in the last 24 to 36 months, it appears to me, much more so than any time in my lifetime, that there is finally an awakening. I think this idea that they were saying that somehow or another a tattoo parlor was essential, and a abortion clinic was essential, and a gay bar was essential, but church was not essential. And I saw
wake up, church.
Those three large pastors, one in Southern California, and one in Houston, and one in Atlanta. He said in 2000, he said, we're not sure we're going to open it all this year.
Unbelievable.
And you think, and the scripture says that we're not to forsake the abandoning.
I know.
And so much the more as you see that day appear.
Yes.
And so here they're saying it's not important. And so we're seeing the tares and the wheat are beginning to separate out. And I'm quite frankly, in this terrible, difficult time that we're facing, I really am quite optimistic, because I sense a spirit of awakening that's taking place. And it's essential, because the world needs a strong and correct and balanced America.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And we need voices like yours, voices of wisdom, experience, the fathers of the nation. And you are like the founders, the fathers that speak into what was and what should be and what has gone wrong. They've tried to silence voices like yours, voices like mine, because we've seen this trend, we've seen this transition in America that tried to destroy America. We've seen it. We watched it happening right before our eyes. And this younger generation doesn't know. And they won't know if they inundate them with all kinds of lies about America. They tell them that America is a bad place, an evil place, a place that created slavery. Not that there was slavery in the whole world at that time, but no, America is the evil country that created it. They treat it that way. And so we have all of these lies. Our history's been rewritten. We've watched these things play out. I saw it even when I was in school begin to happen many years ago, when the 40s and 50s and liberals tried to move into, leftists tried to move into the education system, remove God. Prayer was taken out of school the year I was born. But thankfully, I had a fourth grade teacher who still put prayer in her classroom. She was up there in years, but she did the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. She did a devotion from the Bible and a prayer, and it impacted my life in such a way, just as a little child, because she said, I don't care what they vote or decide. I'm going to continue to put God's word in my classroom. This was in public school. When I tell kids that in public school we used to pray and pledge allegiance to the flag, they're shocked. They're shocked. They can't believe that. So
just as we're shocked that they're not. My wife mentions that at the end of choral practice, Everyone at the end, they all stood and said, "May the meditation of our heart, words of our mouth, the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer." And then they left. It was a major part of everything, because without that, you'll end up, without God, you'll end up saying that a full-blown man is a little girl.
Yeah.
And you say, no, that's too simple. No. Man without God goes completely haywire.
Oh, Bob, we're already seeing it. We're seeing
just
this.
Across the border in Michigan, they passed a law that if a woman says to you, "I'm Napoleon," and you say, "Yes, ma'am," that is a felony in the state of Michigan to misgender that person. Now, this isn't something that we say could happen if we abandon God. That's where we'll end up. Now, this is what we're seeing. Yes. Now, let me say something else. So when this started and the churches did not speak up, so once you took the Bible out, now there's no standard of right or wrong. And I tell young people, I said, I've never owned a bicycle lock in my life. I said, when I came out of school, there's 300 bicycles all over the place. Not one of them was locked, because on the wall of every classroom it said, "Thou shalt not steal."
That's
and
right.
And everybody had guns in the high school. Every pickup had a gun rack at hunting season. And my wife mentioned one that a fellow walking down the hall with this large rifle, new 30-06, and the principal was they said, "John, where are you going with that?" And he said, "Well, Mr. So-and-so wanted to see it." And he said, "Well, when you're done, bring it back. I'd like to see it too." It never dawned about shooting anybody, because we had "Thou shalt not kill." So when these things began to happen, we did away with blue laws that said that they could that you couldn't demand that schools and businesses be closed on Sunday, because that was a day of worship. But as each incremental step took place, the church was silent, until now we see ourselves in need of a reawakening, of a revival.
Yes.
And so what started me on this is that we're having a meeting, the organization that I'm holding, where it's going to be in Arizona. And one of our members is the Speaker of the House of Representatives in Arizona. And it was the first state, there are now 7, we expect 8 more this year, to say that the money that we give to schools will go to the parents. And the parents will be able to decide where they spend that. And they can go to a school that teaches scripture, a school that teaches patriotism, a school that says boys can only go to boys' bathrooms, and vice versa. And when we get that, we can right this ship. It's been drifting for 40 years. Once we allow parents to make these decisions, then I think we're going to see a real revolution in education. And people say, and this is the big thing, they say, well, what about the inner city school that's no good? And my response to that is very simple. That is, it'll close for 24 hours.
Exactly.
And somebody who knows how to run a school system will come over there and say, well, all these people will give us thousands of dollars for each child, and we're going to get the teachers sitting cross-legged on the steps out. We're going to get the spray paint off the wall. We're going to clean, and we can write this thing. And competition only works every time.
Yes.
Socialism only fails every time. Socialism is where you don't have a choice. You have to do, the government tells you what kind of car to buy, what kind of house you can buy, what kind of school you can go to, what kind of doctor you can get. And America is different from the rest of the world, is wealthier than the rest, because we get to choose our car, choose our home. We want to now be in socialism. In the education system is all messed up. Socialism is always messed up. So now when we give competition back in the education system, we'll find out that we'll have the finest education system in the world, just like we did 40 or 50 years ago.
Yes,
it's not complicated. It's just a matter of using the same principles that have been proven to work.
That's exactly right. Free enterprise produces opportunity. Now we see what's going on with the future of jobs like this too. We see these monopolies, the tech monopoly coming in now controlling. So during COVID, we saw businesses shutting down. We kept telling people, do not shut your business. It is the backbone of our nation. Without small business, without free enterprise, we don't have a nation anymore. You can't have free enterprise you can't have a nation and have freedom without free enterprise.
That's correct.
And what you're saying applies exactly to the school system too. We've had to put up with these teachers that were terrible teachers because they had tenure. They were allowed to continue to do bad things to kids and to do bad things, teaching things that were harmful, but yet nobody could remove any of them because of that. And there's been this whole, as you said, it's a socialistic system. The power needs to go back into parents' hands, and the free enterprise system will work there just like it does everywhere else.
Take,
So
for
good.
example,
So
in
good.
Baltimore, there's not one single child in the Baltimore school system that can read and write at grade level. Not one. Not
In
one.
Baltimore?
In Baltimore, of all the schools, there's not a child. None of them. And of course, but that's not as bad as the Chicago school system and the other. So it's wherever the left gets control. That's why you and I like to live in a more rural area, because we know each other and we care about those things. But and that gets back to what Thomas Jefferson was concerned about. He said, once more people live in the cities than in the country, then that's when the country will be in danger. So that's where we are. We're really at 50-50, the red and the blue. So.
Wow. So, you've seen what's going on with former President Donald Trump. Who would ever think we would have a president indicted 4 or 5 times, arrested, a mugshot? These things are bizarre, and it shows us, it should awaken us to where we are. What do you think about that? What do you think about the 2024 election?
Well, we've never seen anything like this. And when we've heard people say that democracy was on the ballot, they kept saying democracy is on the, well, we didn't know what they meant. Now we know what they mean. That means if they got control, if they got in the White House, if they got control of the Senate, that they would literally take democracy out, that you couldn't vote for who you wanted to vote for. They would take the candidate that you want to vote for and put them in jail. And the idea that these dozens and dozens of charges, and to the point that my little niece said to her mother the other day, said, well, there must have been something wrong in there of all those. And that's the goal, to make you think that. Let's just touch on a handful of them. One of them in New York, they claimed that he attacked this woman some 37 years ago.
Bizarre.
Now, just stop and think about this nonsense. That he attacked her in Bergdorf Goodman, a downtown department store in the middle of New York City. But just around the corner is one of the finest hotels in the world, the Plaza Hotel. And he owns the Plaza Hotel. So let's just stop and think. If you wanted to seduce a woman, would you go attack her in a public place, or would you take her over to the hotel that you own? So this woman only came up with this just a couple of years ago. She writes a sex column, and she was on CNN and bragging about that she believes that women like to be raped. This woman is bizarre, and yet here he has to go there and to be in court to prove his. Now, there was a time when prosecutors, when district attorneys recognized that every crazy person that walked in off the street, and because they didn't like their neighbor, said that neighbor was trying to kill his son or something, you would analyze them a bit.
Right.
But what we're seeing now is a destruction to our elected form of government, where these people, evil people, are attacking the leading candidate on the Republican Party to put him and anybody associated with him.
Right. They're trying to put fear in anyone around him.
To break them financially. I know a very close friend there in Ohio, and who has spent over $100,000 defending himself on just witness, on being interviewed by the FBI and elsewhere. Hasn't been charged with anything, didn't do anything. But it's just an effort to break them financially in order to not be involved in government, which gets back to what you said, because they don't want godly, sane, patriotic believers involved in government. And so they want to make them pay such a price. There's a list of delegates that are called electors, and the Electoral College meets and chooses those people. And so when they put the list of electors together in Michigan, they have now sued those people. One of them is an 81-year-old woman, has no money at all, but they've sued her. And what do you do? See, and let's just talk about that for a second. You can get, it's always been said that a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich, because here's what they do. You have a grand jury and you say, it's been told that such and such happened. Now, you're not convicting the person. You're just saying, we will go to court and bring forth the truth. And if they're innocent, they'll be fine. So therefore, what we need to do is just to indict the person so that he can have his day in court. and therefore you get indicted. So that's why you can indict a ham sandwich. If you choose to do that, that's why you have to have honest, capable people as your district attorneys and as your prosecuting attorneys in our state of Ohio. But that's what George Soros figured out. He said, this is simple. And so what I'll do is I'll take a little bit of money, because nobody knows who their district attorney is anyway. And I'll put a little money, and I'll buy these district attorneys in Chicago and in Atlanta and in Washington, D.C. and in New York, and I'll just give them a couple $1 million. Any Republican running against them will only have 150 or 200,000, because nobody cares who the district attorney is, and there aren't any Republicans there anyway. And so we have these political activists who are violating our system, unlike ever in the history of the United States of America, and indicting people left and right. That even Donald Trump doesn't know who those 19 people that were indicted with him. I happen to know some of them, because some of them are actually good friends. And Mark Meadows, who left his seat in Congress to become chief of staff, is as fine a Bible believer as ever walked. And they charged him, now get this, 2 felonies. One was a felony that they asked for a phone number, and he passed the phone number of the lawyer that they were trying to call. And they said that was part of a conspiracy, and he would get 4 years in jail for giving a person a telephone number. Now, in order to not go to jail, he's going to have to raise tens of thousands of dollars and so what they're doing is that they want some of these people that you and I've never heard of, Drenda, why did they prosecute them as well? Because they have nothing. They have nothing. And so they'll say to them, if you'll just say that Donald Trump asked you to do this, we'll drop the charges. Right. And that they're doing everything to try to get him to flip.
That sounds like January 6th too. They put people in there. Oh, well, if you plea bargain, you won't go to prison. Just say that, his speech, his influence made you do it. And the people that didn't plea bargain, they have a 6-year sentence. I watched video footage, shocking, of a police officer from his town who was helping protect a police officer. First, he helped, share how to give CPR to a person that had been pushed to the ground, and then was even beaten with a stick by another police officer, and then he's protecting a police officer, and the police officer on video camera says to him, "Thank you, man." He goes, "I'm one of you," because he's a local police officer in his home. He didn't enter the Capitol. He wasn't doing anything wrong, illegal, immoral. He actually assisted the police officer, and they got him for assault of a police officer. But he could have walked scot-free if he'd have just said, what you're saying is so true.
That's why this election is so critical. I had the experience just a couple of weeks ago with a young man that went in the Capitol with a friend, and he was her protector. He was her bodyguard, but he didn't have any gun, of course. But he was just there to protect her. He didn't speak to anyone. He didn't touch anything. He didn't do anything. Walked in and walked out, and they've just now put him for 37 months in prison. And the list goes on. So anybody that wants to talk about Donald Trump took a nation that was right on the cusp of collapsing.
Yes.
That is that China had us almost by the throat.
Yes.
They were just about in every way, and he came in and put a stop to it. Because of standing up for America, putting America first, the stock market in China went down 70%. The stock market in America went up 50%. And the money and strength began to come back to America for 20 years. This is all available. This isn't my opinion. FRED is called the Federal Reserve Economic Data. Anybody can look it up. If you take the median income of America, just 2 years after Clinton signed the free trade agreement with China that gave them all the privileges, that if you took a factory and put it in China, you didn't have to pay all the taxes and meet all the regulations you would if you were in America. So by the time it took effect, for the next 22 years, you'll see that the median income in America was completely flat. That people took money from America, from Main Street up and down the streets, all the stores that you and I used to shop in when we were little and now are empty. They took that money and sent it to China to build the factories. Donald Trump says, I'm opposed to that. We're going to leave those things here. And so the money began to flow back. The jobs began to come back. You remember that Barack Obama was making fun of him about manufacturing. What are you going to do? Wave a magic wand? Yes, he did. He waved the magic wand of freedom.
Yes.
And as a consequence, for the first time in 20 some years, manufacturing jobs came back. And here's the point: the median income in America, that for the first time in our nation's history had been flat for 22 years, jumped $8,300 in the 4 years that he was president, as people began to save and invest and America began to grow. Now, once the election was whatever happened, only one person in four, by the way, only one ballot in four was cast on election day in 2020. So of the other 3 out of 4 ballots that said that Mr. Biden got more votes than Obama did, and nevertheless, so when he took office, first thing he did, shut down oil, gas, the pipelines, all that. And now, because of inflation, the purchasing power of Americans has fallen $7,300. So we're virtually back where we were when Donald Trump took office. So those that are in the money business, and you mentioned it right there with the pandemic, when people were asking as to why is the stock market going up when everything is closed, I said it's very simple. Just look, what stock market? The small businesses don't have stock. Only the large corporations have stock. They're called publicly held companies. And every day that they had the stores closed, they were getting more and more market share. So Walmart and Amazon and all these were making billions and billions. Why? Because every single day a small business was going under. Yes. And the most massive, Robert Kennedy Jr. talks about this, the most massive transfer of wealth ever in the history of mankind. So that's what they're fearful, that if Trump gets back in, he'll stand on the side of the people who have kids graduating from high school, that want to have a job, that someday want to own a home. The price, the monthly payment for a home is now up $1,300 over just the last 3 years. $1,300 will put most people out of the home buying business. Yes. So that's what they're doing versus what Donald Trump is.
And BlackRock is buying up those houses like crazy. So when Klaus Schwab at the World Economic Forum says you'll own nothing and be happy, that is their plan, to take everything we own, shut the small banks, the community banks, give us a few the big banks that are part of their big agenda and their big corporations, and it puts us in poverty, puts us back in a socialist Marxist system. You know better than anyone.
There are very few people that know what you just said. What you just said is very, very important. But if you will just ask around, talk to a realtor, talk to somebody who tried to sell their home, many people were just about to buy a house. And just as they were about to purchase it, somebody came swooping in with a cash offer that took the house out from under them. Yes. It's happening left and right. Now, who's doing it? Exactly what you said. Yes. That is that those large banking houses are buying land or buying homes, because that's the safest investment to prevent people from owning them and making renters out of all Americans. And unless and of course they're all Democrat contributors, they own the Democrat Party. Unless we win this election, the idea of people being able to own their own home, they expect by the end of this decade, just 7 years from now, to have 60% of all the private housing in America.
There are a lot of Christians who would tell you, a lot of leaders, a lot of pastors that would tell you, don't talk about certain things. In many ways, the church at large has been outwitted by Satan. We don't want to be silent about these things. We want to speak up. It takes courage. It takes boldness. But if we don't address and expose the deeds of darkness, then they take over. We must counter it. We must know our enemy. We must know our adversary, and we must know what his tactics are. We cannot be complacent anymore. You have influence. God has placed you in a sphere of influence. You are a soldier of the light. We need to be straightforward with the truth. Help us to be strong, God. Help us to do our part, Father, to be disciplined, to be ready, to be soldiers of light, soldiers of truth. God, help us to be on guard.